Hello, good listeners, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, where we share stories with you about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. I'm your host, Dan Dick. Our story this week is about a family divided. In 1926, Maria and Johann Neufeld made the difficult decision to move from Lost River, Saskatchewan, to a new Mennonite colony in Paraguay. But most of their 7 children were adults, and not all of them wanted to uproot their lives. In the end, 3 of their children made the move with Maria and Johann. The other 4 stayed behind in Saskatchewan. Maria and her children in Paraguay wrote many letters to their family back in Canada. These letters are held at the Mennonite Heritage Archives, and many of them have been translated to English by Maria's granddaughter, Mary Entz Epp. Maria Neufeld was born Maria Kroeker in 1870 in the Chortitza colony in Imperial Russia. In 1876, when she was just 6 years old, Maria, her parents, and her 6 siblings emigrated to Canada. They settled in the village of Scheenweese in Manitoba. In 1890, Maria married Johann A. Neufeld. They lived in Manitoba for over 20 years, and in 1911 they moved their family to Lost River, Saskatchewan. Money was tight, but they managed. They had a large and successful garden and a root cellar to keep their harvest long into the winter. But in the 1910s and 1920s, tensions were rising in some Mennonite communities in Western Canada. When the first wave of Mennonite immigrants from Imperial Russia arrived in the 1870s, the Canadian government promised them certain privileges. One of those privileges, the right to teach their children in their own schools, was not in the federal government's jurisdiction. Now, 40 years later, provincial governments began enforcing their control over education and began imposing conditions on Mennonite schools. In 1916, the government of Manitoba passed a law requiring all elementary-aged children to attend English-language public schools. The government of Saskatchewan soon passed a similar law. The Neufeld family and many others were deeply concerned about the threat of assimilation into mainstream society. Mennonite communities began discussing options for relocating to places that would allow them control of their own schools. They sent delegates to Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Paraguay. One group of Mennonites left for Mexico in 1922. Maria and Johann, along with 1,700 others, left Canada for Paraguay in 1926. But the move split their family. By then, almost all of Maria and Johann's children were adults, some with spouses and children of their own. Not all of them wanted to leave Canada for the unknown. In the end, 3 children went with Maria and Johann. They were Jacob and Maria, who were the 2 eldest, and Klaus, the youngest, aged 14. Also included was Jacob's wife Gertrude, their 7 children, and daughter Maria's husband Abram Bergen and their 6 children. The other 4 of Maria and Johann's children chose to stay in Lost River, Saskatchewan: Margaretha, Johann B., Helena, and Cornelius. The journey to Paraguay was difficult and long, and it was made more painful by the family separation. Maria, Johann, and the accompanying family traveled from Lost River to Plum Coulee, Manitoba, where they left on a train in December 1926. The train took them to New York City, where they boarded a ship. After stops in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, they disembarked from the ship in Asunción, Paraguay. From there, the group took smaller boats up the Paraguay River to Puerto Casado, where they were to stay until they could settle on their new land. The journey took 5 weeks. In a letter to her children and grandchildren in Canada, Maria wrote,
"Beloved, 5 long weeks' ride now separate us from each other."
Life in Puerto Casado was hard. Families lived in a hot, cramped tent city for months. In April of 1927, Maria's son Klaus wrote a letter to his brother Cornelius in Canada. Unlike the rest of his family, Klaus wrote his letters in English. He writes that they can't go to the new land yet because it hasn't been surveyed. He says, "The wagons that we ordered aren't here yet. If they were here, I think we people would go there without asking anybody." Maria also wrote about the difficult conditions in Puerto Casado and her struggle adjusting to the new climate. In November of 1927, she writes,
"When the temperature reaches 30 degrees or more, I find it very oppressive. For a change, we get some cooler days, which refresh us again. Some nights I cannot sleep because of the heat. Not everyone feels the heat to be as oppressive as I do."
Families in the tent city didn't have access to clean water. Many got sick, and about 10% died. Between 1927 and 1928, Maria's daughter-in-law Gertrude and 3 grandchildren died. Back in Lost River, Johann had been a blacksmith. He had hoped to continue his trade in Paraguay, but his tools were stolen. In an undated letter, likely from 1927, he writes to his son Cornelius, "Our money is practically all gone. By the time we buy a cow, it will be gone, except for a few dollars. We must have a cow as soon as we get to our land. In any case, when we get to the Chaco, I need to borrow some money, if possible. The blacksmith tools are very expensive. The cost will be over $100. In April of 1928, over a year after they had arrived in Paraguay, Maria, Johann, and their family were finally settled on their new land. They built a tin-roofed shelter, planted a garden, and were encouraged to see their crops grow. The new colony was named Menno, and the Neufeld settlement was named Bergtal. Although they were now out of the tent city in Puerto Casado, life was still difficult for them. In April of 1928, Maria writes,
"Many products are scarce. We have had meat once. Potatoes? None. Many of the villagers here have lacked lard for a long time. It is simply unavailable at this time. The older people tell us that when they first came to Canada, conditions were even worse. We are hoping for better times ahead."
After trying life in Paraguay, over 300 Mennonites returned to Canada. Maria and Johann's children back in Canada tried to convince them to return too, but Maria was steadfast.
"You are wishing that we would return to Canada? When we consider the reason we cited for making this move, namely for the sake of our faith, our conscience will not let us return."
Maria felt betrayed by the families that came to Paraguay but chose to return to Canada.
"Here in our village, 3 large families are preparing to go back to Canada. It is scary when those whom we trusted are leaving us, such as old Mrs. Bergen. Where is faithfulness in our day?"
Despite her strong will to remain in Paraguay, Maria's pain at being separated from her children often comes through in her letters. In July of 1928, she writes,
"All these difficulties, especially loneliness, depresses me to disinterest in everything. I have said to Father that being a mother and raising children has often been hard, but has brought us many joys and pleasures. But being ripped apart from you, our beloved, is much harder. Until the last hour we were always so together. Suddenly we are torn apart."
Maria's homesickness for Canada also shines through her writing.
"Almost everything in the garden got frozen. My 10 potato plants are gone. We cannot get seed potatoes for this variety. Also, they don't taste as good as the Canadian ones. Our sweet potatoes are frozen, but they will grow again. We are not very fond of these. The Canadian ones taste better."
Maria wasn't the only one experiencing homesickness. In September 1928, her son-in-law Abram writes, "Today was a especially good day for harvesting. I didn't even have time for an afternoon nap. Memories frequently take us back to Canada. Our crops are different. Some of our citrus trees are bearing fruit, like oranges and grapefruit, which grow very large." Over the years, they faced many struggles. Sickness in their cattle caused a milk scarcity. Unpredictable weather and insects impacted their crops. Money was tight. They had to do everything themselves, including making the bricks to build their houses. Maria's son Jacob sent a letter to Canada in August of 1935 saying, Every day we have a strong north wind, endless work, and we don't know where to begin. So much remains undone. I'm always lacking supplies. My plans and good intentions to build always end up with a lack of money, which constantly evades me. I again ditch everything and walk away unsatisfied. Maria and Johann were also aging and often coping with various ailments. In a 1937 letter, their daughter Maria Bergen writes to her siblings,
Mama says she is well. She doesn't want to give in to aging. Father still walks to the village, but his steps are shorter than they used to be. Mother takes the hoe to the garden to hoe rows. Soon her legs are tired.
Maria's pain at being separated from her children did not lessen over the years. Every development in her children's lives back in Canada, engagements, marriages, new babies, tragedies, she learned about by correspondence. She and Johann were invited to their son Cornelius's wedding in Canada in 1928, but could not attend. In response to the invitation, Maria writes,
We wish you joy and blessings on your journey together. It is hard to get over when we hear of such important events in the family happening and we are widely separated.
As she couldn't be present for such important events, Maria lived for the letters she received from her children, and particularly for the photographs they sent of their growing families. In April of 1942, Maria writes that the whole family in Paraguay gathered for Easter Sunday.
We sat in a circle in the shade, while I read aloud the letters we had just received from you. It seemed almost as if you were here in our midst.
Maria often lamented the infrequency with which her Canadian family wrote. In their own letters, Maria's children in Paraguay relayed this to their siblings back home. As the years passed, both Maria and Johann suffered from more ailments. In the late 1940s, Maria's vision began to fail her, but she continued sending letters, her handwriting becoming more erratic as she struggled to see the page. In January of 1950, Johann passed away. 9 months later, in September, Maria followed. She was 80 years old. Shortly after her death, Klaus wrote in a letter, I always had the feeling that Mother was never truly happy here in Paraguay, but now they are both in their permanent home. In December of that year, daughter Maria Bergen wrote about her mother's last days.
In detail, she told us how we were to clothe her for the coffin. Take the Canadian bedspread with the lace edging to dress me. There are 2 kerchiefs my mother gave me years ago. Lay the white one around my neck and put the silk one in with me. Whatever I'm leaving behind, you may divide among yourselves. I don't expect to be here long.
Maria's children continued to write letters to each other between Paraguay and Canada. Due to another division of faith, some of the children later moved from Paraguay to a new colony in Bolivia. In 1972, Klaus returned to Canada. He was the only sibling to do so. Letters written by Maria Neufeld and her family members are held at the Mennonite Heritage Archives in Winnipeg. To see some related photos online or to hear this episode again, visit mharchives.ca. If you have questions or comments about this program, email us at info@mharchives.ca.
Hello, I'm Conrad Stace, the archivist at the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Your donations help preserve and share stories like the one you just heard. To send a gift, visit our website at mharchives.ca and click on Support, or give us a call at 204-560-1998. Thanks also to our partners, Canadian Mennonite University, the Centre for Transnational Mennonite Studies, Mennonite Church Canada, and Golden West Radio.
Our story-finding mission for next week will take us to the southern Manitoba communities of Rhineland and Rosengart. We'll talk to organizer Lyle Thiessen about their 150th homecoming celebrations planned for July 18th to 20th. Today's story was researched by Kaylee Dick and Conrad Stace and written by Kaylee Dick. Kaylee also presented the quotes from female letter writers. I'm your host, Dan Dick. Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back next week with more stories about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for listening.